This episode is brought to you by Atlassian. Atlassian makes the team collaboration software that powers enterprise businesses around the world, including over 80% of the Fortune 500. With Atlassian's AI-powered software like Jira, Confluence, and Loom, you'll have more time to do the work that matters. In fact, Atlassian customers experience a 25% reduction in project duration per year. Unleash the potential of your team at Atlassian.com. Atlassian.
This is Optimal Finance Daily. Some lifestyle creep is inevitable. It may even be desirable. By U-Ming Lee of uming.medium.com. And I'm your host and personal finance enthusiast, Diana Merriam. Now let's get right to it and continue optimizing your life. Some lifestyle creep is inevitable. It may even be desirable. By U-Ming Lee of uming.medium.com. Almost everyone who claims to be a personal finance guru warns about the dangers of lifestyle creep. Personal finance influencers like Kevin O'Leary and Graham Stephan scream loudly about the perils of store-bought coffee, as if making your own coffee would solve everyone's financial problems. Other writers hem and haw about one expense or another. Own more than one pair of shoes in your life? You're a victim of rampant consumerism. Your reckless spending will bring about the apocalypse. I'm only mildly exaggerating. These declarations may be intended to highlight how out-of-control spending can devastate your financial health and the planet. But they may also lead people to believe that they don't have their personal financial house in order unless they save 90% of their monthly income, eat only steamed cabbage, and drink only plain water. Needless to say, neither extreme position, reckless spending or unyielding self-imposed austerity, serves you well in the long run. I've been reflecting on the lifestyle creep concept. Let me show you why I think some lifestyle creep is acceptable and even desirable. There's no shame in starting life flat broke. My first rental after college was a flop house in a seedy neighborhood in London. For months, I slept on a worn sofa in a room with a big window overlooking a heavily fortified school. I'd be risen in the morning by the sounds of the school's janitor clearing away stuff left behind by junkies the night before. And in the evenings, I'd make sure I got home before the sun went down because the streetwalkers would appear soon after. Needless to say, these were not ideal living conditions. But I did it because I didn't have much money at the time. It was the only place I could afford in an expensive city. Austerity is tolerable only when it serves a purpose. I moved out of my unwholesome apartment as soon as my financial situation improved. I reasoned that my safety was more important than saving a few $100s on rent each month. I got a nice new mattress when I moved into my next apartment. I even bought myself a sofa bed to break my sofa sleeping habit after I realized I'd grown too accustomed to sleeping on a sofa. You could say that my newfound financial status inflated my lifestyle. However, I contend that I had outgrown the need to force myself into harsh living conditions. See, forced austerity has a corrosive impact on your mental well-being. Being forced to live in an environment far below your comfort level means you're constantly exposed to minor irritations. I'm not naturally inclined to be offered weed of dubious provenance on the street. Neither did I find it enjoyable to be propositioned by a junkie with mottled skin while her malnourished child sobbed and wailed nearby. These events weren't deal breakers in and of themselves. But as I forced myself to endure these minor indignities due to my difficult financial circumstances, each event sapped my limited willpower. Like me, you don't have an infinite supply of mental fortitude. Living far below your means due to forced austerity means that the constant drip, drip, drip of the little indignities you're forced to endure will eventually wear you down. Your standards will change whether you like it or not. As you progress in life, you may find yourself unable or unwilling to make the same trade-offs you once did. In my 20s, sleeping on a dingy sofa didn't feel like much of a sacrifice. Given the affordable rent, it was a no-brainer. In my 40s, however, if I slept on a sofa with questionable spinal support, my aching back would be a nagging reminder to accept my physical limitations. When faced with the possibility of making costly trips to the chiropractor and developing a painkiller habit, that cheap rent is no longer an affordable choice. Ignoring our changing circumstances and what we decide is acceptable or not risks financial ruin. For example, my aunt was forced to live far below her means for decades by my overly frugal uncle. She seemed fine for decades, but at some point, the family is unsure when, the constant indignities of being forced to endure conditions she barely tolerated made her snap. One thing led to another, and she ended up blowing the family's $3 million savings within 3 years. Spend mindfully instead of avoiding lifestyle creep altogether. You may have guessed by now that I've been deconstructing the entire lifestyle creep concept. I made a point of discussing forced austerity, which I consider to be the kind of frugal spending you engage in because you're forced to do so by external circumstances. Eating no-brand tinned spaghetti for every meal because that's all you can afford, instead of eating a well-balanced diet of fresh foods, is a form of forced austerity. Likewise, living in a slum flop house because it's the only place with rent you can afford is very much forced austerity. As a result, getting out of these conditions as soon as possible after one's finances improve is a necessity and not lifestyle creep, the way Kevin O'Leary and Graham Stephan portray it. Living in forced austerity conditions exacts a toll over the long run. This toll may take the form of a higher risk of diabetes or malnutrition, or the likelihood that a drug-addled junkie will stick a knife into you. Having said this, I'm not suggesting that you go entirely the other way and live a life of over-the-top conspicuous consumption. The happy middle ground I propose is one of mindful consumption. This entails making informed purchasing decisions. To be more mindful of one's consumption, focus on getting the most value out of a purchase rather than focusing solely on price. Value is highly subjective. The perception of what is valuable varies greatly from person to person. A high-end digital SLR camera can be an extremely useful tool for a professional photographer. For someone like me, who makes a living by writing words rather than taking pictures, that camera is more difficult to justify as a tool. At this point, I'd like to note that an object's value doesn't have to be defined solely by its utility. It's perfectly fine to consider a purchase that brings you joy to be valuable as well. If that $5 Starbucks coffee helps you through a tough day, go for it. But if it's become a habit and you're drinking Starbucks coffee daily without thinking about it, that $5 a day quickly adds up to $150 a month. You'd have to ask yourself if the pleasure you get from your daily Starbucks habit is really worth $150 per month. Final thoughts. Lifestyle creep isn't always a bad thing. Nobody wants to spend the rest of their life sleeping on a filthy sofa and subsisting on tinned spaghetti. Even the most non-materialistic among us want to improve our living conditions. If nothing else, rising living conditions signal that we're improving our lot in life. Personal finance gurus do their followers a disservice by preaching forcefully against lifestyle creep. They create the impression that any lifestyle creep must be avoided at all costs if one can dream of ever achieving financial freedom. The pursuit of mindful consumption, in my opinion, strikes a happy balance between rigidly self-enforced austerity and excessive consumption. Being mindful of your purchases entails determining the value of each purchase to you. It means breaking free from mindless routines that slowly but steadily deplete your resources. It also means avoiding imitating others unthinkingly, buying things only because they're popular rather than because they fit your lifestyle or needs. Finally, mindful consumption implies acknowledging that your possessions are there to serve you rather than you becoming trapped in an endless cycle of working yourself to the bone and scrimping and saving to buy things you don't really want. You just listened to the post titled, "Some Lifestyle Creep is Inevitable. It May Even Be Desirable," by U-Ming Lee of uming.medium.com. And I'll be right back with my commentary. Buy low, sell high. It's easy to say, hard to do. For example, high interest rates are crushing the real estate market right now. Demand is dropping and prices are falling, even for many of the best assets. It's no wonder the F.I.R.E flagship fund plans to go on a buying spree, expanding its billion-dollar real estate portfolio over the next few months. You can add the F.I.R.E flagship fund to your portfolio in just minutes and with as little as $10 by visiting fundrise.com/OFD. That's FUNDRISE.com/OFD. Carefully consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of the F.I.R.E flagship fund before investing. This and other information can be found in the fund's prospectus at fundrise.com/flagship. This is a paid advertisement.
Oh, it's such a clutch off-season pickup, Dave.
I was worried we'd bring back the same team.
I meant those blackout motorized shades.
Blinds.com made it crazy affordable to replace our old blinds.
Hard to install?
No, it's easy. I installed these and then got some for my mom. She talked to a design consultant for free and scheduled a professional measure and install.
Hall of Fame son.
They're the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings in the world.
Blinds.com is the GOAT.
Go to Blinds.com for 40% off site-wide. Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions may apply.
I truly believe that if you could learn only one thing about money, it should be to live below your means. It seems like such a simple concept, but there's so much packed into that statement. It's relevant if you're low income or high income, and it demonstrates the dispassionate nature of money. I feel that the author today has misinterpreted the concept of lifestyle creep. I think of it as the kind of lifestyle inflation driven by an insatiable need for more that causes you to eventually live beyond your means. This is very different from improving impoverished living conditions. The way you spend money is a very personal choice, and many of us who talk about money will share what works for us. I personally don't expect anyone to make the same spending choices as me, but I share to demonstrate how I've come to spend below my means. Some people simply have more means, and so they could buy Starbucks every day and it wouldn't matter. But other people have more modest means, and spending $5 or $10 at Starbucks every day actually does consume a disproportionate amount of their monthly income. That's why the concept of spending below your means is so universal. It's going to look different for everyone because we all have different levels of income, different preferences, and different circumstances. But that should do it for today. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you tomorrow where your optimal life awaits.